Voice of sharing, Durian Heat.
The 11 Malaysia plan was recently being tabled by the Malaysian government. But what does it take to move Malaysia from a middle-income nation to a high-income nation? Will the 11 Malaysia plan take it closer to its Vision 2020 targets? And as well as trying to address realities and challenges on the ground, especially concerning social economy and inequality. I'll be speaking with Dato Charon from the Khazanah Research Institute on this particular topic.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene and you're with me at Durian ASEAN. I'm interviewing Dato Charon. He's the Managing Director of Khazanah Research Institute. Sorry about that. So, hi.
Hi, Ali.
Hi. Today we are going to talk about the 11 Malaysia plan, which is something that the Malaysian government has been looking forward for the next 5 years, and a lot of people have been commenting about it. But before we dwell deeper into the Khazanah Research Institute's opinion on the 11 Malaysia plan, perhaps a bit of introduction. What is KRI stands for?
Okay, well, the Khazanah Research Institute was set up at the end of 2013, and we started operations first quarter of last year. And what we're trying to do is to do research, data-driven research on what we consider to be the pressing issues of the nation, and then come up with policy recommendations which are actionable and hopefully improve the general welfare or the general well-being of the people of Malaysia.
So recently, you actually, not recently, but a couple of months ago, you released a report for KRI on the socio-economic status for Malaysians' household. Perhaps a bit of explanation on that.
Yeah, this was towards the end of last year. We published something called the State of Households, where we looked at the government statistics, principally from the Department of Statistics, to give everybody a picture of where household incomes are. And one of the things we believe in is that while GDP growth is important, and people talk a lot about GDP growth, really GDP growth for what? And for us, I mean, the GDP growth to improve the well-being of most households. So we looked at some indicators, for example, what household incomes are like, what's the average household income, what's the median household income. The difference between median and average being, average is when you total everybody's income up and you divide it by the number of people. Median is the halfway mark. So the thing about average is that it can be distorted. If 10 of us are sitting in the room and a billionaire suddenly walks into the room,
that's true,
our average wealth has gone up, right? But the median wealth hasn't gone up at all. So we looked at both of those things. We looked at how it's median household incomes are affected by location, which state you're in, whether you live in a town or in the village, what ethnic group you're in, whether your household is headed by a male or a woman. So all these things, and really the idea was to paint a picture of where we are today.
So the outcome of the research, were they surprising to you in terms of what you found out about it?
Not to me personally, because I kind of knew those numbers, but I think it was surprising to many people. One of the things which was surprising was the disparity in incomes between different parts of the country. Yeah. So some states are very wealthy. For example, Kuala Lumpur, if you look at in terms of GDP per capita, it's the same GDP per capita as Korea. Now, I'm not saying Kuala Lumpur is Korea, but it just gives you some idea of the wealth of Kuala Lumpur compared.
So the rural city divide is huge.
It is huge. I mean, the easiest way for a household to have a higher household income, it seems, is to move from the rural areas to the urban area. And some parts of Malaysia have very low household incomes and very low GDP per capita. On the East Coast, for example, where some states are have a lower GDP per capita than Indonesia, and which is surprising, because we all think of Malaysia as everybody having electricity, everybody having water, but it's not true of the whole country.
And there are some parts of places like in Sabah, Sarawak, people still do not enjoy access to water and electricity.
Yeah. And we normally think of that because there are some remote areas in Sabah and Sarawak, so you can imagine it's harder for electricity and water to reach them. But even in states in the north, on the east coast, many households don't have water, which is quite surprising.
Yeah, it's quite surprising. And based on your research, I would say that the biggest challenge that Malaysian government need to address in the future is the question of redistribution, or trying to create, equity among all Malaysians in terms of access to opportunities and basic needs. Do you think the 11 Malaysia plan, with its focus on advancing Malaysia towards a high income nation, does it really address on that particular area? Because when you mentioned earlier that the focus for the government solely is on GDP, and of course when you talk about high income, what it means is high incomes in terms of GDP, but does it how can the government translate that into also getting the rest of Malaysian society to feel that we are a high income nation, or we will be a high income nation?
That's a really good question. When the government announced the budget last year, the national budget, this concept of people economy and capital economy was something which was raised in that budget, and I think that distinction is also found in the 11th Malaysia Plan, and we would support that 100% because it's not just about raising GDP, it's about raising the incomes of the general population. And if you look at the plan concentrates on what's called the bottom 40% and how to improve their incomes. So I would endorse all the ideas in the plan in terms of what's important, and what's important ultimately is for people to have to improve the general well-being of the majority of the population, so that most people have more money to spend. Yeah.
So perhaps you can just highlight to us some of the 11 Malaysia Plan trusts that you feel is something that would benefit the Malaysian society, or you think that it can be improved in a way.
So I'm opening the plan right now as we speak. It's a very thick document, and I confess,
very colourful one as well.
Yes, very colourful, and I confess I've not memorized every single word in it. But if you look at the plan, right, they talk about 6 strategic thrusts, and the first one is inclusiveness towards an equitable society. Now, clearly, who can argue with that, right? I mean, that is a good strategy to have, and that is a good aim to have. The next one, for example, improved well-being for all in terms of health and standards of living. Again, you can't argue with that. Accelerating human capital development, and this is one thing which we also talked about in our research which we released last year, is that if you look at, for most people, right, they get their incomes from the jobs, from salaries. Some people are
salary income, not from assets.
Yeah, some people are businessmen, but there's not a big proportion of the population. Some people have lots of assets and can live off the interest or the dividends. But for the vast majority of the population, you get your income, we get our income from our jobs, from our salaries. So if we want to improve people's well-being, we have to try and raise salaries. So there are 2 ways to raise. We think that there are 2 main ways to raise salaries. One is to have people have more skills, and again the plan, the RMK 11 talks about skills training and TVET, and that's a really important thing, because if you have higher skills, you're more likely to get a better pay. The lowest pay normally goes to someone who has no skills at all. The more skills they have, and skills doesn't necessarily mean a university degree. Skills can mean training to do certain types of jobs. Certificates in technical training, for example, can get you a higher paid job. The second thing you have to do is to create the kind of jobs which require skills. I mean, there's no point having everybody skilled in something and no employer wanting to hire them. So the other thing we talked about in our report was this idea that we should also promote the creation of jobs which create promotion of industries which create high-paying jobs, because they're high-value-added industries. And again, you can see that being mentioned in the plan as well. I mean, the plan talks about. But do you
think the plan itself, it's good on paper, it's very colourful, but in reality, it might not, fit into the goal of the government, because, you have have some Malaysians who are well educated, but they would rather choose to migrate to other countries rather than stay in Malaysia. And brain drain is one of the biggest challenge or problem in Malaysia. Do you think the 11 Malaysia plan would be able to address that?
I wouldn't say that brain drain is the biggest problem we have. I think we have there are many issues in the country, of course, but and brain drain is always mentioned. I don't have the statistics. I think Talent Corp has come up with some statistics, and yes, it is important to have people, people with skills and the ability to contribute to remain in the country. But just touching on brain drain for the moment, it doesn't mean that just because some of our clever people go and work in the US doesn't mean it's necessarily bad for the country. For example, if somebody here was very good in nuclear physics, it's good for the country that that person goes to the US or wherever else it is and pursues the nuclear physics
but it also
research.
It also shows that, I mean, for your example, it also shows that Malaysia do not have a good R&D, I would say it's either industry or sector or segment. Could be one of the reasons why you have highly educated people who cannot find jobs or who have mismatch between talents and industry.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there is. I mean, one of the things we shouldn't happen is to have that kind of mismatch. If we are spending a lot of resources to produce people skilled in a particular thing, we should also create industries which require that particular skill. And that's one of the things we've been talking about in both the report and I think RNK 11 talks a little bit about that. But on research and development, yes, as a country we need to do that. And one of the ways to improve the kind of industries we have to make sure that they create better paying jobs is to have more innovation so that we create high value industries which pay well.
Glad that you mentioned the word innovation because it has been used repetitively in the 11 Malaysia plan. Do you think innovation, do you think that the plan itself would spur innovation among Malaysian society or at least the industries?
I think the plan recognizes, and we all recognize, that innovation is important because that's how you create high value jobs. High value jobs come from industries which create high value and which when employees are highly productive, and you get there through innovation. But the problem, I shouldn't say the word problem. The thing about the word innovation is that it means so many things, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you talk about innovation, you're talking about some guy living in San Francisco in the Silicon Valley inventing the next app. Yeah. But innovation doesn't just mean making the next app, making the next social app or whatever.
Could be the guy who invented washing machine and
could be
changed the world.
Yeah, or innovation, for example, in agriculture. Our yields in paddy are very low compared to some other countries, and if we had innovation in agriculture, we could have far more productive paddy farming, resulting in higher incomes for paddy farmers. So innovation can mean so many things. That yes, it is important to have innovation, but I'm not sure when we talk about innovation, people are thinking about different things. Will Malaysia turn into Silicon Valley tomorrow? That seems more unlikely, but that's not the only kind of innovation there is.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
This is an excerpt from the 11 Malaysia plan, which was tabled by the Malaysian government.
Dengan kehendak dan izin Yang Maha Berkuasa, saya bentangkan di sini rancangan Malaysia ke-11 dengan 6 strategi tumpuan. Pertama, inclusivity. Kedua, kesejahteraan rakyat. Ketiga, modal insan. Keempat, pertumbuhan hijau. Kelima, infrastruktur. Dan keenam, inovasi dan productivity. Bagi memastikan 6 strategi tumpuan RMK 11 ini berjaya mencapai matlamatnya, game changes berikut akan dilaksanakan. sebagai pemangkin ke arah lonjakan yang signifikan bagi menjana pertumbuhan ekonomi dan meningkatkan kesejahteraan rakyat secara inklusif. Pertama, meningkatkan produktiviti. Kedua, menjana kekayaan melalui inovasi. Ketiga, mempertingkat peratusan masyarakat kelas menengah. Keempat, menteraskan pendidikan dan latihan teknikal atau TVET. Kelima, melaksana pertumbuhan hijau. Dan keenam, melabur di bandar-bandar berdaya saing. Walaupun demikian, sesebuah negara maju tidak boleh hanya didefinisikan dari sudut pendapatan per kapita saja. Ringkasnya, pada hemat saya, kita perlu membangunkan sebuah tamadun holistik di mana masyarakatnya seharusnya memiliki nilai-nilai tinggi, berakhlak, mencintai ilmu pengetahuan, rajin membaca, menghargai seni budaya dan warisan, serta memiliki minda yang mencerminkan pula rakyat sebuah negara maju.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
But do you think the overall focus and objective of 11 Malaysia plan is to gear towards that direction, focus on specific sectors, trying to spur Malaysia towards a certain direction?
Look at the 6 strategic thrusts we just talked about. Inclusiveness, I've mentioned, well-being, human capital development. The next one is green growth for sustainability and resilience, strengthening infrastructure, re-engineering economic growth. All of those are, you can't argue with those. Obviously, as a country, we need to do all those things. And then, after talking about strategic thrust, they talk about game changers, productivity, the bottom 40%, TVET, which we talked about just now, green growth again, competitive cities, innovation. These are all really important things. And as a country, we have to do it.
So you're quite optimistic that we will get there through the 11 Malaysia plan?
We have to be optimistic. We have to be optimistic. There's too much pessimism going around. Right? You have to be optimistic, because if you're not optimistic, then nothing happens. So you have to be optimistic, and we have to try. And again, in terms of all the thrust and the game changers, it's hard to disagree with any of them. Obviously, at the detail level, you can always argue: is this necessary? Is it best to do this one first, or this one second, or instead of doing it this way, let's do it another way? And those kind of those kind of debates are good debates to have. And at the Research Institute, at the Khazanah Research Institute, we want to join into that debate, because we too have some ideas on how to achieve these objectives. But the objectives as a whole, it's hard to argue. Who doesn't want more people in the country to have more money?
Talking about more money, in terms of the average household income that is being written in the 11 Malaysia plan is 6,141 ringgit. But a lot of people are disputing that number, saying that if you have so many people receiving BRIM, which is like those earning less than 3,000, how do you justify that the average household income is at 6,000?
Okay, those numbers come from the Department of Statistics, which publish their numbers every 2 years or so. So, in our State of Households report, we use the 2012 number. The numbers you're referring to just now are the 2014 number. Now, the full report hasn't come out from the Department of Statistics yet, so I'd like to be able to study that report in full to give a proper answer to your question. But just in terms of average and median, again, there's this thing about what we talked about just now. If a billionaire walked into the room, the average income will go up. So averages are perhaps not the best thing to look at, so we prefer median. But median income has gone up as well. When we did our report, in the 2012 numbers is around 3,700 ringgit a month. Median income, I think, is now, if I'm not mistaken, has gone up to around 4,000 ringgit a month in the last 2 years. And so people, households have got more income. Now, if the income comes from BRIM or from salaries, to me that's not relevant. That's irrelevant. At the end of the day, how much income does a household have? In other countries, for example, in Western countries, there's a lot of social welfare spending, where people get all kinds of benefits. Even in Singapore, they give a lot of cash benefits to people in the lower income groups, and no one would. Yeah. So,
but libertarians will argue against that. They would say that why would we want to have a more welfare-centric nation? Why can't we just try to focus more on making individual Malaysians be able to stand on their feet, be able to earn a certain level of income and certain level of, to sustain a certain level of quality of living? Do you think that's possible in the time being?
Well, I agree. Some people are of that view. But if you look at the history of the country, we've given rice subsidies, we've given sugar subsidies, we've given petroleum subsidies, we give almost free medical care, almost free education. So clearly, as a country, we believe in helping people. Right? So if you want to help people, there are many ways to help them. You can subsidize petrol, which we think is a really, really bad idea, and I'm really glad the government stopped it, because if you subsidize petrol, you're actually subsidizing the rich person more than the poor person, because the person who drives a big car uses more petrol, and so gets more petrol subsidy than the person who drives a small motorbike, who hardly gets any petrol subsidy. So having decided we want to help people, give them cash. Why give them subsidies? Give them cash.
You have a second report that you'll be launching soon.
Yeah, we have a few more reports coming out where one of the things, two things which are of interest to us are food and food prices and affordable housing. So those two reports are coming out. Yeah.
Tell us more about the focus on affordable housing, because with a high cost of living, especially when you want to have a high GDP growth, and the government is embarking on this idea that Kuala Lumpur and all other cities will be interconnected with each other together with Singapore. How can the government address two things: affordable housing, as well as trying to, I would say, control the cost of living, or just let it naturally be it?
Those again are good but difficult questions. If you look at the plan, the Malaysia plan talks about competitive cities, and what most people around the world think at the moment is that you need a dynamic city to really spur economic growth, because when you have a dynamic city, that's where innovation happens, that's where new businesses happen, that's where people connect, and then you have the spillover effect from a vibrant city to the economy as a whole is a very important one. But you can't have a vibrant city if people can't afford to live in that city. Right? So the way to get vibrant cities is to solve the problem of affordable housing. Now, it's not an easy problem to solve. But if you look at some other countries, they've managed to provide affordable housing without necessarily requiring government support. Private developers are able to provide affordable housing.
Is that what the government will be embarking?
No, I think if you look,
private partnership.
In RNK 11, it talks about some government initiatives to come up with affordable housing. But we, the Khazanah Research Institute, we think that it's also possible for private developers to make decent returns providing affordable housing. I mean, it's happened in other countries. So if it's happened in other countries, we think maybe
what about
it can happen
the
here.
idea of having probably the Singapore's model of HDB plan, or maybe the recent news about Berlin putting a rent cap for houses so that it won't become as expensive as other cities would be.
It's funny you mentioned Singapore, because everybody's, and you mentioned just now, libertarian, we shouldn't help people, shouldn't give people money and all that. But Singapore is, HDB housing is the ultimate in government, giving people cheap housing. There's one solution, and in Malaysia we do have a lot of social housing. Project Perumahan Rakyat, PPR, for example. But generally, social housing is for the very low income people. The thing is if you are too wealthy to qualify for PPR, but not wealthy enough to buy a house, that's where the problem That's where the problem is. So what we're trying to do is to look at, what can, if any, what can be done to provide affordable housing to people in that.
So what's the plan? I mean,
let's wait for the book to come out, because I don't want to paraphrase. And also, it's not fair to my colleagues who've written the book for me to summarize the book in one sentence. I think we should wait for that. But yeah, but those are very important things. And the other question was on cost of living. Again, if you look at, and this is what came out in our State of Households report, is that for most people, the biggest expenditure items are food and housing, and after that, transport. So if you can give people affordable houses close to where they live, you will reduce the expenditure on housing, and you will reduce the expenditure on transport, because they don't have to travel so far, right? So again, hopefully that addresses some cost of living problems. The other one is food. So
cook more at home.
We have the government. But there are two food price indices. One, food away from home, and food at home. So the prices of food away from home are going up faster than the prices of food at home, and so it's actually, you're right, it is cheaper to
especially with GST.
to cook at home than to, but again, not everybody has the time to cook at home and things like that. But one of the things we're looking at, and our food report will go into this in much more detail, is to find out what, if anything, can be done. The thing is, the good thing is that petroleum prices are coming down, or they came down, they went up, but they haven't gone up as high as they were before. So that is a big factor in reducing the cost of living, because directly reduces the cost of transport, and indirectly.
But only for the time being. In the future, because the price of oil will go up and down, according to the trends. How can Malaysian government address if, let's say, the oil prices goes up?
Well, the prices go up. Hopefully the Malaysian economy goes up, and hopefully everybody gets paid more. So the more you pay, the more you can afford. And that's the other thing. For very wealthy households, the cost of food is not a big component of their expenditure, because ultimately it's only so much you can eat in a month, right? So the more money you have, the less cost of living matters. And the ultimate solution is not so much the cost of living, we think, it's to give people higher incomes. If everybody had a higher income, then the price. I
guess that's the elephant in the room. When you talk about, you can talk about raising productivity and innovation and trying to create this skilled labor among Malaysians, but I think a lot of Malaysians, including those that migrated to overseas, a lot of them say that the wage in Malaysia has stagnated for decades, and nothing has been done to raise it up. Do you think what do you think could be done or should be done by the government?
This goes back to this what we were talking about earlier, which is this idea of creating better types of jobs in Malaysia, higher income jobs. In the past, as a country, we've relied on being a low-cost producer. Right? So low cost, and that's unfortunately meant low pay. So if we want to change that, we can't just depend on being a low-cost producer. We have to be producing high value things, and we produce high value things, maybe we'll pay people higher. But it is also true that, and this is what came out in a State of Households, is that if you look just at the listed companies, the big listed companies in Malaysia, the listed companies in Malaysia, and compare them to the listed companies even in Southeast Asia, as a whole, we pay our employees less as a percentage of EBITDA or profits compared to other countries.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Can you give the percentage of how many percentage of the profit goes to the workers and how many of it goes to the employers?
Sorry, I can't remember. I have my book. I can go back and get it out of this, and I'll tell you the exact number. But give you another perspective, is if you look at GDP as a whole, and you look at how many percent of GDP is wages and salaries. In Malaysia, it's around 1/3.
1/3.
Around 33%.
What is the healthy number?
Well, in advanced countries, in the West, it's almost 50%.
Oh, okay.
Even or actually above 50%. Even Singapore is in the mid 40s. So we have our workers are paid less than some other countries. But compared to other developing countries, it's around where we are. So if you
But with such huge wage gap, between workers and the owners of the companies, how can the government achieve the 45% middle income population?
Well, that's all the Malaysia plan is about. Right? Those are the strategic trusts. But it's not easy. If it was easy, it'd be done. It'd have been done by now. It's not. It's not easy. And Malaysia's gone through this amazing transformation in terms of from 1957 until today. And the thing is, we have to keep doing another amazing transformation, which is to become even higher income.
But do you think that the government should also pressure the private sector? Because recently Singapore has raised its workers' salary and increased to 4.5%. Do you think that's the direction that Malaysian government could take?
Well, we've tried it already with the minimum wage, and all the employers complained, and we're not sure whether everybody has complied with the minimum wage, and it's not very high, the minimum wage, and just to get that has been quite hard. So yes, we should try, but every time, and I'm not just talking about Malaysia, but in any country in the world, every time the government tries to say you should pay your workers more, businessmen will always come back to say that we did that, we'll go bankrupt. Now, whether it's true or not, in every situation, I don't know, but yeah.
But that also goes back to the way that things move forward in Malaysia. It seems to be stagnant in a way that it doesn't really, if it doesn't get the support of the business community, it cannot move forward no matter how closely the 11 Malaysia plan is. Maybe there should be a kind of dynamic of structure where things can move forward with the acceptance as well as the engagement with different sectors.
Yes, and I think again skills training is probably the best example of that. There's no point. Sorry, I'll rephrase this. If we just send kids to go and do technical training and they get a piece of paper, and it turns out that's not the skills which employers want. Employers want a different type of skill. We've wasted a lot of time and resources. So the best way to get skills training going is to get the employers and the trainers to work together to come up with a set of skills which the employers really want.
Just like in Germany.
Yeah, just like in Germany. Germany is like the ultimate in skills training. Everybody, the whole world wants to copy Germany, and only the Germans have succeeded to be like Germany. But everybody always says Germany is. And I think the German system is an amazing system. And if we could get to a Malaysian version of the German system, then that would be ideal. But you have to remember that the Germans have been doing this since the mid-19th century. So they've had a couple of 150 years to
So we have a long way to go, another 100 years maybe. Just kidding about it.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the 11 Malaysia plan. Of course, the ultimate goal is to achieve this idea of Vision 2020. But if you look back to the past, during Tun Mahathir's time until now, how do you see the progress of Malaysia? Do you think we have achieved quite a feat in terms of arriving at or will be arriving at the Vision 2020, or do you think that there's still a huge gap either in terms of socio-economic gap or other gaps that needs to be fulfilled, and what's your thought on that?
Well, Malaysia is now a high middle income country by kind of like international definitions of that. So other countries which are high middle income are countries like Turkey, which is above us, Brazil, Mexico below us. And when you consider where Malaysia was when it started in 1957, where we were a poor country, very high incidence of poverty. It's amazing what's happened to the country. We could have, if you look at where other countries were when they started in 1957, we could have so easily gone that way, but we didn't. We went this way. No, we're not as rich as Korea. We're not as rich as Japan. But Korea and Japan are quite unusual because there are not many other examples of Korea and Japan, right? So the question is, how do we become like a Korea or like a Japan? We can't copy exactly what Korea and Japan did, because what they did in the 80s and 90s. We're now in the 21st century, things have changed, but our goal has to be to become Korea and Japan. But it's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Especially with a multicultural model like Malaysia.
Actually, maybe it's good because of a multicultural model, because the world is now is a very international, global place, and I think one of the advantages Malaysians have is that we're just used to dealing with people different than ourselves, right? Every day you go out and you meet people who eat differently, pray differently, and you just have to live with them, right? Whereas in other countries, maybe they don't have that kind of advantage. I think it's an advantage that we have a multicultural, multi-everything society. But it's, all these things are hard. They're not easy. I keep saying, if it were easy, every country in the world would be a rich country. It's not easy to do.
So since it's not easy, my final question would be, what is the biggest challenge that the government need to focus on for the 11 Malaysia plan?
Well, business leaders, business theorists, management writers, management academics are fond of saying that it's not so much the strategy but the execution, and that will be true of any plan. All of us every new year wake up and have all these resolutions and all these plans, right? Achieving them is another thing. So it's the hard thing will be to implement everything, and I'm sure that we'll have to change some of the things put in this plan. This plan may say the way to achieve this goal is to do this, and we may find out that this is not the right way of doing it. We have to do it in another way. But that's okay. That's okay. You can't be perfect in terms of planning how you're going to get there. But I think but where we want to get to, I don't think it's hard to disagree with anything in here on where we want to get to, because the idea is to make more people in Malaysia have a better life. Okay, and a better life doesn't just mean money. I keep saying money, because that's the easiest measure, but better life also includes living healthier, having access to infrastructure,
addressing issues like climate change, which is part of the 11 Malaysia plan.
I'm actually a climate change skeptic, but we won't go into let's not get into climate change at the moment, because it's a whole different thing. Although one of the this is a plug for my friend Willie Soon, who is you call him a brain drain, but he works in the Harvard Smithsonian Institute for Astrophysics, and he's a very vocal scientist who is skeptical about climate change. But anyway, that's a different subject altogether. But yes, that's the future we want for ourselves and for our families, and but I do think we have to be optimistic, though, because we all sit around being pessimistic, nothing's going to happen.
So let's be optimistic for the 11 Malaysia.
Yeah, and just to be optimistic generally, because if you want to do anything, you've got to be optimistic, or something happens.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.